Hey everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. We will get started in about a minute or two. All right, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Bridging the Data and Communication Gap with Intuicom. My name is Connor and I'll be your moderator. Before we get started, I just want to run through a few housekeeping items. All phone lines are muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature within your GoToWebinar toolbar. Presentation will last about 45 minutes or so, which will give us some time to answer any questions you may have at the end. If you'd like a copy of today's slides, they are available for download within the GoToWebinar toolbar. By attending today's session, you are eligible to earn TARP points through IMSA. For those of you who provided your IMSA number during the registration process, Western Systems will go ahead and handle that submission process for you. And lastly, today's webinar will be made available for you to view anytime on demand. You'll get a follow-up email on Thursday with a link for you to view it on demand. All right, with the housekeeping out of the way, I'm excited to introduce today's presenter, Kai Antrim, Territory Manager for Western Systems. Kai, the floor is yours.
All right, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Appreciate you joining us today. Kind of unprecedented times for, I'm sure, all of you out there, and definitely us at Western Systems, but we appreciate you patching in today. We're going to try and keep things moving along and kind of maintain business as usual as much as possible. On our end, most of us are working remotely if we hadn't been already, and but we're still open for business, open to give webinars and one-on-ones, whatever you guys might need. We just want to be here to assist you guys, but without being able to do the normal in-person meetings. We certainly appreciate you patching in for opportunities like this. So without further ado, I'll get going. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Intuicom wireless communication solutions. On the agenda for today, a little introduction and about us portion, provide some of the solutions that Intuicom has to offer, some of the takeaways and ways that you can keep your ITS devices connected. So a little bit about us. Western Systems was founded in 2001. At the time, all we were really doing was making traffic signal cabinets for the state of Washington. Over time, we realized that there was benefit in having a single provider who was able to provide all the equipment you see out on your streets today. So everything from the enclosures to the controllers, controller software, signal heads, LEDs, safety applications such as RRFBs, school flashing beacons. We want to be your one-stop shop for all of those items. You can think of it as when you do an intersection turn on, you have to coordinate all of the parties, all of the different vendors to turn on their various equipment. But with Western Systems, our goal is to be the one person who's actually required to be there and have competence and expertise across the entire spectrum. So for those of you who don't know us, we were founded in 2001. We're headquartered in Everett, Washington. We've got a 30,000 square foot manufacturing facility just down the hill from Boeing. Today, we're doing business in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, California, and Alaska. We pride ourselves in having a great product line, competent workforce, and conduct ourselves with the utmost integrity. So, here's a picture of our shop floor. At this time, about 40% of our business is cabinet enclosure manufacturing. The rest of it is distributorship. So we build and make enclosures all throughout our territory, And we also are the authorized and sometimes exclusive distributor for everything else you'd see out at the street. So some of the names you might recognize is Siemens for our traffic signal controllers. We also provide Eagle signal heads, Iteris video detection, Intuicom wireless solutions, Alpha battery backup, anything you might need. So if anything piques your interest that I've kind of listed off today, please reach out to your sales rep and we'd be happy to expand and provide any more information you might have. I think a lot of us in some ways have more free time than usual, so it's a good time to kind of review what you have out there, ask any questions you might have. So although the focus of today will be on Intuicom wireless solutions, this is kind of part of a broader overall picture that we're going to call our smart city portfolio at Western Systems. The whole idea is that, as we move forward and our goal of moving traffic more efficiently, more safely, it's part of an overall strategy that we're calling Smart Cities Initiative. That includes our cabinets, our specialty or NEMA cabinets. We also make the Caltrans style 332 style cabinets in-house. Got the other important part of communications that we'll touch on today is your switches or the rugged comm reps, but also moving into things like connected vehicle applications. That's a Siemens DSRC radio you see in the upper right-hand corner. What we're finding is a lot of our equipment out there today has the ability to process tons of data, and we're finding ways to turn that data into actionable, make it actionable so that we can increase throughput and reduce fatalities on our roads. A little bit about Intuicom. They're headquartered in Colorado. They were founded in 1999. They primarily focus on the ITS world, but they also provide solutions for agriculture, earth sciences, research community, anything that requires remote monitoring. Today, they've kind of expanded their focus to include industrial, transportation, machine guidance, and automation applications. But all in all, they're a great company and definitely have competence in the ITS space for what we're normally using them for. So what do they provide? The short of it is the radio communications. There's tons of companies out there that provide it, but these guys provide hardened equipment that's purpose-built for the applications that we're looking to place the products in. So we've got a full suite of hardware to support any sort of connectivity application. They've got best-in-class software. The support from the manufacturer is second to none, and all of the technicians at Western Systems are competent at working on, diagnosing, configuring all of the radios that Intuicom provides. Intuicom can be found on all 7 continents in every possible climate. They've been in the business for over 20 years and have proven historical performance through all environments. Their equipment is ruggedized, outdoor hardened, IP67. It's made to be out in the elements and shouldn't be replaced by off-the-shelf indoor rated type application. Some of the applications that you guys will see, traffic and ITS networks is what we focus on. The ability to do video backhaul and remote video detection and surveillance, link changeable message signing, and extending existing fiber for kind of last mile connectivity. It also replaces expensive lease fiber or cellular subscriptions. It's also good for permanent and temporary installs. Essentially, with your Intuicom network, you own the entire network and there's no ongoing cell plans or anything like that. The idea used to be that that cellular was cheap to put in, but then had the ongoing subscription costs. But what you'll find with solutions such as Intuicom, they aren't actually as expensive as you might think for each unit. And then after you put it in, you're done. There's nothing else you have to pay for. The software is free. It's a set it and forget it kind of model. As I mentioned, you owned your network. It's just not feasible to put fiber where it's not at. It's fiber is obviously the kind of the gold standard of communications, but if you just have one link or you're not doing other sort of construction where you're digging up all the streets, it's really not feasible to just add fiber for a couple links. The radio technology today provides enough bandwidth and reliability that even if you're doing something such as an adaptive traffic control system, radio network today is a viable solution. Dedicated bandwidth, no data throttling. So maybe your cell phone modem works great, but then after you've been streaming video and you're streaming your controller and bringing everything else back, and your data starts to get throttled, then you start to notice it maybe at the end of the month, or you're subject to forced outages. They're secured via multiple layers, cost-effective, and highly reliable with minimal maintenance. What you'll find, and we'll touch on this later on in the PowerPoint, is the installation of these is pretty easy. Quick, goes up in a day, configure it in a day, and you have the ability to scale it across an entire traffic signal network. So I'll talk a little bit about the actual hardware. The most common radio that we use for ITS communications utilizes the broadband radio spectrum. So the EBX radio is kind of their working class. I wouldn't call it the low end because it's highly capable, but for the frequencies it's able to operate at are 5.8, 4.9, or 2.4. Your 5.8 is going to be your most common commercial use bandwidth. 4.9 is going to be very similar to 5.8, but it's actually a licensed frequency. So if you do find there's a lot of interference, 4.9 is a good option, but you do have to go through the FCC to license it. A couple applications in our area, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Bellingham, Washington, they've both opted for 4.9 gigahertz spectrum due to either city requirements or nearby interference. 2.4 gigahertz is normally used as Wi-Fi is what you'd commonly see it out, but we also, if you do a dual radio with Intuicom, you can do 5.8 radio with a 2.4 radio, and that gives you the ability to talk to those radios remotely rather than going into your network or your traffic signal cabinet and hardwiring into it. The EBX line of products has a data rate of up to 300 megabits per second. When you think about something like a traffic signal controller, that's probably using less than a meg. Video detection, probably a meg. PTZ camera right in there, 1 to 2 megs. So what you hear a lot is radios can't support the data rates that we require. Well, today that's just it's not the case. Radios can be used even for backhauling. So they have incredible range. One thing to note though, and we'll talk a little bit more about doing site surveys and assessments, the line of sight is an absolute must when it comes to point-to-point radios. It is susceptible to environmental conditions such as trees, hills, curves, but there are plenty of ways to mitigate some of those issues. Each radio has an RJ45 Ethernet port. The EBX family has channels that are 5, 10, 20, and 40 megahertz wide. This gives you a lot of flexibility along that spectrum to build out a network. You'll see with some of our higher throughput radios, you do have to be careful because you want to be able to not be talking to all of the other intersections that are down the road. So having a 5 megahertz wide channel across, I believe, 100 megahertz spectrum gives you the ability to make sure that your intersections, if they're in succession, aren't tripping all over each other. Everything's passive, PoE. Every Intuicom radio comes with a PoE injector already included, as well as a Pelco bracket. Right out of the box, I'd say 80% of applications you can handle right out of the box. They provide 160 feet of pre-terminated Cat5 cable. So when you're doing your site survey or talking to us about the equipment that you might need, let us know where you'll be pulling in the Cat5 and where the signal cabinet is in relation to the antennas. And obviously we'll help you with the layout, but it's important that we get you the right amount of cable. Each device you can see on the side of that device has a power on reset button. So instead of having to go through the software or sending it back to the manufacturer, you can just click it and it'll reset it right there on the unit. It also has a signal strength indicator that you'll see on the side. So instead of setting it up and then coming out of your bucket truck and going and seeing how how well the signal strength is, you can at least get an idea by angling the radios until all 4 bars are illuminated green. And one of the main differentiators that makes this a relatively lower cost radio and also only require passive PoE injector is it only has, it does not have embedded GPS location. This is a little bit of the, shows you how the system works. Each of the radios comes with each of these cables. So you've got your antenna, your passive PoE injector, can come on a DIN rail mount or just screw in anywhere you have room in your cabinet. Then your power supply coming from AC power, typically in your cabinet. And then your other end of your PoE injector going into, in this graphic, it's going into a laptop, but it would probably be going into your switch. If all you're bringing back is a controller and you have a modern controller with an RJ45 port, it's also possible to plug directly into the controller and use it as a switch, which can preclude the need for a bunch of additional hardware just to get your controllers talking to each other. But any growth for the future, you'll want a hardened outdoor rated switch inside your cabinet. That would get you the ability to eventually bring back more things than just a controller, such as video detection cameras, PTZs, any remote monitoring systems you might have out there. The Axiom family is kind of the next level up of the Intuicom radios. The form factor of each of these radios is very similar, but with the Axiom, as I mentioned, you have the potential for a dual radio. That can be dual 5.8 radios, or it can be one 5.8, one 2.4, whatever combination you might require. But by having the capability of dual radio, you can get up to 600 megabits per second. Line of sight range is still about 20 miles. Mind you, that's in ideal laboratory conditions with no obstructions, but we do see some places such as Eastern Washington where we don't have some of the same topography that we have kind of on the west side. In that case, you are able to get pretty close to that 20-mile range. It's also equipped with an RS-232 port in case you have devices that you want to bring directly back to that port. Channels 5, 10, 20, and 40 megahertz. Again, power on reset button. This is the model that does have a GPS geolocation. For hardware, that means that it has to have a slightly larger PoE injector, so I believe that's PoE++. So at that point, you're up to a 60-watt PoE injector. The advantage of having the GPS location, I'll show you just a quick snippet of the user interface for the software that comes free with the radios, and it's got native integration with Bing Maps. So instead of placing your radios, it'll just find them and place them on the map itself automatically as soon as they're plugged in. The Axiom AC family, this is your big, wide open data pipe that can be used for backhauling. It's only available on the 5.8 gigahertz spectrum. On the standard radio, it's 866 megs. So you think about, add up all of your IP addressable devices that you might want to bring back. Everything from, four-way detection, video detection, say you're monitoring your battery backup system, your controller, you got a fixed camera out there, all of those across, say, 30, 40 intersections. This guy is able to backhaul, an incredible amount of data. At a single radio, 866 megs, and then a dual, you're up over a gigabit. Because the pipe is so wide, you lose a little bit of the range, so it's only quote unquote, only 5 miles. I would say what to be careful with here, and this is where we come into play, helping you design your network. The channel widths are very wide, 20, 40, and 80 megahertz. Well, the entire spectrum is only, for this radio, is only approximately 90 megahertz. So if you've used a 40 megahertz wide channel, you've almost taken up half of that. So when you think about what that means at an intersection, if you're, say, a couple 500 yards apart, and you've got one of these radios here, and down the line, they're going to start talking over each other. So it's important to go through your network and say, where do we have fiber? Where do we have copper? Whatever else it may be, and strategically place these out there. So this is best for maybe a backhaul from a fiber location or something like that. Again, I've got the power reset and embedded GPS location. One of the things that differentiates Intuicom is software. There's a lot of radio companies out there. You got to go through an awkward, clunky web browser, whatever it may be. Intuicom spent a lot of time developing their software that they call Broadband Pro Enterprise. It's free. You can download it just to play with it. I'll show you guys a couple snippets of it, but it makes building out your radio network incredibly simple. Some of the features, once you've got your one radio configured and you're adding other radios to the network, you can just drag and drop them onto each other, and then it copies over the previous settings. This makes it a lot quicker than going into each one and doing setting all of their configuration settings. Single page view, so all of it fits right on your screen, so you're not jumping back and forth. Performance reporting, so you're able to set up alerts for yourself for any issues you have, or set thresholds for when your signal strength drops below a certain level, get notifications for that, and it's highly secure. Everything is just done through the Ethernet port. All of the radios are programmed similarly through including the contact closure radios, the serial radios. They all just plug into your computer, have a free download. Each of them provide network-wide diagnostics that will give you the real-time performance of each of your links and an analysis of the data flowing through. This is a screen snippet of Broadband Pro Enterprise. Like I said, we're in Everett, Washington. You can actually see right in here, right in the middle of your screen there is where our office is. This is your landing page for all of your radios. So once you add a radio, plug in a radio, it'll be called unassigned, and it'll be automatically titled Change Me. That's telling you to change the name of it, change some of the settings, because at that point, everything's at factory default. Once the units have been assigned and placed on your network, they'll go to the upper left-hand column under Broadband Unit. From this page, you can see your link statistics. You can graph your data usage over time through the Data Statistics tab. It also gives you your event log. So when your comm goes down or you have a big data event or data storm, it can pull back all that information for you there. As I mentioned, if this is a GPS radio, it's just going to pop up right onto the map there. And if it's BBX line of products, that's pretty easy too. You just drag it to wherever you want it and place it there. As I mentioned, here's a screen snippet of what it looks like when you plug the radio in. So right out of the box, what we recommend you do is plug in your radio to the switch, plug in your switch to the power, and then power up the radio. At that point, you can go through your normal command prompt and try and ping the radio, but it should just appear right there. We recommend that you use Broadband Pro Enterprise. It's a much more user-friendly process than going through just a regular web browser. The items that you need to change is set the name, IP address, default gateway, subnet mask, and then write to unit is kind of your save, but nothing actually changes on the unit until you say write to unit. And then once you're inside of the unit, that's where you can set your mode. So your mode, your options are going to be access point or station. That's one of the advantages of the Intuicom system is every single one of your radios can be either an access point or a station. It's not a true master-slave situation where The hardware is different depending on whether you're an access point or not. Each of them are backwards compatible with each other. This is where you can set your SSID, channel width, your encryption, and your pre-shared key. Configuration report. It's easy to pull back what you configured a single radio at, so you could do one and then print out the report and then go add it to another, and without having to redo everything. And that's exportable as a PDF document. So you just click export to PDF, and there's all of your information about that particular unit. Other radio in the family is an EBX radio. If you don't need the data rates of broadband radios, oftentimes the EBX is a good alternative. It utilizes the 900 megahertz spectrum. So for those of you familiar with that, it's a lot less, well, it's not nearly as directional as a broadband radio requires. What you gain is a lot more range. What you lose is the data rate. So 4 megabits per second, that'd be capable of bringing back a controller, connecting controllers from intersection to intersection, maybe one video feed if you have it at a remote location. It's not made for backhauling entire networks, but it is a really easy to use and flexible device. It's got 2 RJ45 ports and also a DB9 serial port, which are common in kind of older controllers. Low power consumption, so if necessary, this could work in solar applications. We've seen some people attach these to school flashing beacons. So if all you're sending is a schedule or something that doesn't require a lot of data, the EBX is a good option. The DIO radio is, DIO stands for Digital Input Output. This is also a 900 megahertz radio, but it doesn't have serial communications. This is simply doing on and off applications. So it's a contact closure radio made to activate things on demand or by a switch. And I will show you a couple of the applications where we've used DIO radios for some sort of unique needs. But this is a budget-friendly IP67 outdoor-rated contact closure radio, and it also works really well in solar applications. Support. So if you guys come to us wanting a radio, we want to go out in the field, we want to see the lay of the land, we want to do a site assessment that shows us exactly where we need to mount radios, which radios are best suited, and after the fact, we're right here on the West Coast. We employ 5 technicians who are all competent at working on and programming these radios. So we pride ourselves in world-class technical support at all times. We definitely want to be there on site when possible to help you guys do these radios. A number of our customers will purchase radios and tell us the configuration settings before they go out. So we'll take them into our office, configure the radios with the IP ranges that you require, and then turn them over to you. And at that point, it's just a matter of hooking them up. Network paths, studies, network design, those are imperative for making sure that the network's going to function properly. Going out there and seeing what the potential obstructions are, what equipment you have out there, is important. We need to identify each link by mapping and analyzing, obviously, the topography, and then let us provide the recommendations for maximum performance to ensure that the system works as you intended it to. And that's a free service that Western Systems will offer before, during, and after implementation of a wireless network. Here's an example, City of Port Angeles, Washington. It's a town of about 20 intersections that has a WashDOT corridor going right through it. They asked us to come out and tell them how they could get their network of old controllers connected. It's interesting about the geography of Port Angeles. If you're familiar with the state of Washington, it's kind of in the upper northwest corner, but It's also one of the gateways to Canada. It's got a lot of boat traffic coming in and out, but it's perhaps more disturbingly right along a tsunami evacuation route. So currently their traffic signal cabinets are all on fixed timers down at the intersection with no ability to deal with events that are not pre-planned or anticipated. So even when the ferry traffic comes, there's no way to coordinate the signals right through their downtown core to maximize efficiency and throughput. So they asked us to come out and do a network study and figure out how to get back up a hill to City Hall so that they can both coordinate the intersections, do some kind of peer-to-peer with their traffic signals, but also bring back things like video, be able to push out timing plans, changes, things remotely without having to go out to each and every cabinet. Interestingly enough, when we were out there, we found out that they actually had fiber drops all along the corridor. So our job of getting up the hill was proved to be a moot point. All we had to do was shoot our radios back to a couple of the fiber locations and then have it backhaul to City Hall. So this is the service we provide. We could have sold a lot more radios, but going out there and identifying that they had fiber that they had access to for no cost. Apparently about 20 years ago, they made an agreement with the telecom companies that they could use their poles for the fiber, but that the city would have access to a couple of the strands. So we went out there and put together a parts list that included 10 Axiom radios and all of the mounting equipment you can see in the upper right-hand corner to make them, get them a central system up and running. We also, I think we have somebody from Sammamish on the phone, so or on the call. They were responsible for putting together a pretty cool, unique flasher application that required Intuicom radios. Essentially, East Lake Sammamish Parkway is a really, really busy north-south corridor along the east side of the lake, east side of Lake Sammamish. Southeast 24th Way meets at a T intersection and has almost no visibility of the traffic coming from the left and the right. Historically, they had a old signal cabinet that was hooked up to a bunch of loop detectors. All the loops got cut, and so now the signs are just sitting there and unreliably flashing or not flashing at all. So this is an example of where Western Systems was able to pull from their bag of tricks, both on the Intuicom side, but also with our relationships with Carmana, our flasher vendor, and also a radar, utilizing radar that we can provide. So now when you come down the hill, you're triggered by a radar that's pointing at you, and it's sending a signal onto the main line to alert you that traffic is coming from the side street, and vice versa. The vehicles on East Lake Sammamish Parkway are triggering a radar, which is then telling you that cars are coming from the side street. This is what the old cabinet looked like. We were able to put together a system that did not utilize the cabinet at all. Actually, I should preface that. We also provided alpha battery backup to this cabinet. And so all that's going to go in here is a battery backup system. Everything else is contained on the poles where the flashers are, all the flasher equipment, the radar, and then 2 DIO radios. So what you have is the radar sensing a vehicle. It is then connected to the input side of the DIO. The output side is going to the flasher, but also sending a signal to the 2 other beacon locations that they need to go off as well. Equipment used, we used a Carmana flasher system, Intuicom radio, alpha battery backup system to make sure that the system could withstand some power outages, also radar. Cool thing about some of the applications that we custom put together like this, it can essentially utilize any radar you want. The reason we used a DIO radio was because there was no line of sight, and we wanted to have a reliable way to make sure that that contact was closed to activate those other beacons. You could use loop detectors right there at the cabinet instead of having the entire traffic signal cabinet. You could use Opticom if you wanted to alert vehicles when a certain maybe emergency services vehicle is coming. It doesn't really actually, the DIO radio is just closing the contact. It doesn't care what's activating it to do so. Here's another DIO radio application we did, WashDOT North Central region. An engineer approached us and said, we've got a bridge, a spillway along a dam that is not big enough to safely accommodate multiple vehicles when our snowplows are crossing. So you've got a bunch of potentially hazardous situations with a too narrow bridge. The concern is when it's snowing, so you've got poor visibility and slippery roads. What they wanted to do is when a snowplow was on the bridge, they wanted to notify drivers to yield until the flashing stops, which was timed in order to give their snowplows enough time to get across. So what we did is we outfitted the snowplows with Opticom receivers, transceivers, and then put together a custom traffic signal cabinet. What you see on the left side is the Yagi antenna, which again was able to see around the obstructions, which included a couple trees, and the bridge had a large curve in it. As soon as the Opticom triggered the presence of the snowplow, it sent a signal to the other side of the bridge because it needed to start flashing too, not just where the vehicle came from, but also on the other side to alert traffic. There's a potentially hazardous situation. City of Longview, Washington. This is a good example of how it's possible to build out an entire traffic signal network using wireless radios. They had City Hall kind of somewhat centrally located right in the middle of town, but the intersections that they wanted to bring online had a bunch of curves and obstructions. So we walked the site and then made recommendations based on our field analysis of where it would be necessary to have repeaters, where we could have just single access points versus needing double access points. And then we were able to put together an equipment list, which was specific all the way down to the mounting hardware and the mounting angle to provide for them to put in their spec. So to this day, they've put in 18 radios with a plan for 31 more to build out their signal network. What you see is just a Google KMZ file that we put together. We provide that for free. So if you say, hey, I'm interested, I'm not sure if wireless will work here, please reach out to your territory rep and we'd be happy to go out on site and give you the exact recommendations that we can see. So the key takeaways that we wanted you to get out of today is we, both Intuicom and Western Systems, want to be the provider of entire wireless communication systems. Software and support is some of the best in the industry. There's a lot of other 5.8, 4.9, 2.4 radio antenna providers out there, but I think our software is really easy to use and differentiates ourselves. Been out in the field for 20 years, so this isn't a startup company that's trying to schlep the latest radio, and we're committed to your success, both on the radio side and the entire traffic signal side. I do there. Got a couple minutes left. Turn it over to Connor to see if anybody has any questions.
All right, thanks, Kai. We'll get going on the Q&A process now. Please go ahead and use the chat feature within your GoToWebinar toolbar to ask any questions that you may have. Okay, looks like we got a couple questions here from earlier, Kai. The first one is, are Intuicom radios able to talk with other manufacturers' radios?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we get a lot is like an Encom radio or something that are actually pretty similar. The important thing you need to know is yes, Intuicom can talk to a number of manufacturers and probably a lot of the ones you have out there. You just need to know the protocols for those radios, the configuration, the SSID, whether it's an access point or not, what channel it's on, obviously the frequency, encryption type, and the protocol, but those are all settings that are easily changeable in Broadband Pro Enterprise. I was talking to a technician at I believe it was the city of Puyallup that has a big network of Encom radios out there, and he had said, well, we've been buying these forever, but you know, and then I offered that they were backwards compatible and could talk to other radios, and I think that piqued some interest. So yes, definitely, that's a great question.
All right, we just had one more come in here, and it is, can Intuicom radios be used to build out an entire traffic signal network?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of applications. It's important for us to understand, as I mentioned, what kind of data rates you guys are pushing through. But Walla Walla has 4 ways of video detection plus PTZ camera controllers, and they're monitoring their battery backup units, and the entire city, probably 35 intersections, is all using 300 megabit Intuicom radios. So that's definitely possible. Yeah.
Great. Another one just came in. Do you provide evaluations of the Intuicom radios?
Evaluations. What do you mean by evaluations, I guess? So we will, correct me if I'm not getting your question right, but if you, oh, I get it, an evaluation. You just like a try before you buy, certainly. If you've got a link you want to try out and you just want to evaluate it, we can definitely arrange that. We can give you a pretty good idea if it'll work, and probably a bunch of references for you to call beforehand. But if you still want to see it working before you pull the trigger, yes, we'd be happy to help. Please reach out to us.
Next question is, does Intuicom support the 4.9 gigahertz spectrum?
Yeah, it does. So the Axiom radios, the EBX radios, not the Axiom AC, which is the big pipe, the 1.6 gigabit radio, but the standard radios do support 4.9, and we can help you connect you with some agencies that are doing that and walk you through the SEC licensing process. It's just really simple. It's pretty much, I'm city A, this is what I'm using it for, here you go. And then I think you're good for 3 or 4 years before you have to do it again. So yes.
Great. That looks like one more question just came in here. If I have some locations for a site survey, what is the process for moving that forward?
Yeah, reach out to me. I've got my contact information right here. If I'm not your your typical territory manager, I'll connect you with the right person. But what I'd like is I guess just the locations, if they're at intersections, the cross streets, and we can put together, just like I showed you on one of those previous slides, with the Google Map overlay, and we can provide our recommendations and a bill of materials to get started.
Great. That looks like all the questions that we have. So we appreciate everyone attending today's webinar, and have a great day.